For well over 10 years now, there's one piece of software I've spent a ridiculous amount of time using. Honestly, I don't even want to know how many hours, probably years of my life at this point. You know, you use something a lot when you rarely even close it. Maybe not a great habit, but most of the time, I just leave it open on my computer these days to save time. So using Lightroom almost daily now for these years, I've really refined my editing into a very deliberate and well thought out process. But naturally, along the way, I've made plenty of mistakes, and I also see a lot of people making these same mistakes. Some of them easy to do, and some of them even creep back into my own edits from time to time when I'm not careful. So in this video, I want to break down those mistakes and show you exactly how you can avoid them, even a bit of a friendly reminder for myself. Let's jump in. All right, so I've got Lightroom open here, and one thing you'll notice right away is my editing background is white, not the default gray. I prefer a white background because I do like to edit on the brighter side, and trust me, this really does make a difference. If you're unsure, I definitely recommend sticking with that middle gray. That's Lightroom's default for a reason, as it is a nice neutral middle ground. I wouldn't typically recommend going darker, more towards black. You are going to edit on the darker side without even realizing it, but that's just a note and why I personally stick with white. So mistake number one. The first thing I want to talk about is having a very clear intention and a vision for your edit. Now trust me, this might not sound like much, but it is so important for your entire edit, and it's pretty obvious when it's lacking. There is a big difference between editing with more of a purpose and just pushing the sliders around willy-nilly until something kind of looks somewhat decent. So when I look at a photo like this here, I take a look for a moment and really decide what I want to achieve. A few simple questions can help with this. What do I want to improve with the photo? What will help draw the attention of the viewer's eye? And what's the feeling or focus I'm trying to bring? You can see what I wanted to achieve on this one was create a bit of a natural vignette. It's quite flat, the overall image, so I wanted to draw the eye more into the middle towards that train. I also wanted to brighten up the train a bit for the same reason and really tweak those greens so they're looking a little bit more warmer, a little bit more of that kind of orange hue, so just to make it stand out. So I had a clear intention with that edit. Another one here, if we take a look at the before, you can see this one was shot quite underexposed. So what I wanted to do mostly was boost the overall brightness to it, keep that same shadow. I like the contrast in this, so you can see there, subject's still quite dark. I didn't boost that too much, kind of what I was going for or trying to achieve with this particular edit, which draws into my next point quite nicely. And this is mistake number two. So this is a simple one, but one I still see all the time. And it's a big reason why so many photos just end up looking flat or boring to me. We boost up those shadows so we can really see everything in the photo, even bring down the highlights. We're just left with a really flat image that's mostly midtones. And even though we can see everything a little bit more clearly, it doesn't really add anything to the photo. In fact, to me, it makes it look far more boring. Nothing's standing out now. We don't really know where to look. So these darker areas, just like in this one, are just as important as the brighter areas. If I boost those shadows up too much, we just lose all that balance. And again, we don't really know where to look. Coming back to this example, if we go back to the original, even Lightroom isn't great at this sometimes. If I hit auto, to me, this is just too much mid-tone. If I bring it up even more to exaggerate it, you can see there's just so much going on. We're just not creating anything to draw attention to. Compared to something like this, where we've really got attention on that kind of middle scene. It's drawing our eye into those areas of light rather than just those mid-tones. Just a little bit of a reminder, if you do like any of the looks created in my editing, these are all created using my presets, which I'll link down below. I use them in all my editing, but like I always say, presets aren't just a one and done solution. To me, they're always a great starting point, but every photo is different. So I always make my own adjustments on top of that and really add your own flair and direction. Using this way, they can save you a ton of time and really keep your edits consistent, which is exactly why I always rely on them myself. All right, mistake three. Let's talk about clarity. This is something that I've spoken about quite a lot on this channel and something I still see overdone. in both directions. So people often ask how I get this softer, dreamier look. Is it filters? Is it the edit? I've got full videos on this, which I will link above, but in short, it is both. But a big part of this, as you may have guessed, comes from negative clarity. So I use this in literally all my edits. The only time I bring a little bit of clarity back is with masking, which I'll touch on later on. But overall, my global clarity is always on the negative side. So clarity adds this contrast to the midtones, but be careful because it also affects our luminance and saturation. And that's why whether you're adding or subtracting, it can quickly ruin an image if it's overdone. So here's a good example. You can see my clarity is sitting at about -30. If I turn that off, you can just see how it's softening that image overall, giving that dreamy effect. So even up to 40 here is not too bad, but if I start to go beyond that, you can see the image just starts to break down around my subject, especially these areas of light. They're just looking really unnatural now. So don't go too heavy if you can. Sometimes I'll use a little bit of dehaze, you can see, to help with that effect as well. But again, it's usually quite subtle. I wouldn't usually go beyond 10 with this one. And you can see I've just added in a little bit of texture back just because I have softened that so much. The other thing I like to do though, working with subjects, so we still have this real negative clarity effect overall, but on my subject mask here, I've just gone in and added a little bit. So you can see clarity, texture, and dehaze all added back in a little bit while still keeping that net balance of the overall image with that negative clarity, and just adding in that little bit of presence back into your image while keeping that soft, dreamy effect. Quick bonus tip I did want to touch on before we move on is remember to always work on your composition skills. We can always improve a photo with a good edit, but you can't totally save a bad one. So composition is still king, and this is one mistake I made when I started. I spent all this time learning editing, but it took me a while to really start studying and developing my composition skills a lot. All right, next up, mistake 4 is working with color. And honestly, this is part of the edit that I spend the most time on. I am planning a full video just to talk about color editing, but for now, here are a few quick tips. One of the biggest mistakes I see with color comes back to just not having this clear direction and going far too heavy on things like saturation, especially with certain colors. So if I open up this image here, you can see although the image is quite saturated, most of the individual sliders are actually way down. You'll see that I do usually boost the overall vibrance, but always this over saturation, because vibrance is much more nuanced in a way. Think of it this way, vibrance gently boosting those more muted tones, whereas saturation just pushes everything and it can often get quite messy. So if you want to push colors more, I would suggest try working with vibrance first, but then I would also go in and really reduce some of the overall saturation on specific colors. You can see a lot of my edits here are really colorful overall, but I'm usually quite selective and thoughtful in which colors that are quite vibrant. But what I also do is spend a lot of time on luminance. I think this is one thing that is overlooked by a lot of people. Adjusting luminance makes such a big difference to your photos. This is what can draw your eye into specific colors. It can help us kind of draw attention to specific parts of an image as well. You can see with this one, just by bringing up that orange, how much more our kind of train stands out, which is where I want the eyes to be drawn to looking at this image. So luminance is really important. And similar on this one, this is what's kind of boosted up those greens by working with the green and yellow as well. And one you should definitely be using when you're working with color. On to mistake 5, which comes from masking. Now this is honestly one of the most powerful tools we have, which also makes it one of the easiest to overdo in my opinion. The way I like to think about masking is quite simple. Let's use it to enhance what's already there, not totally create this unrealistic lighting situation that's coming from nowhere. A good starting point here is just to figure out the direction of light in your image. Usually this can be done quite easily just by looking at the direction of the shadows. Then I'll usually use radial gradients to subtly just boost or soften that light, often by gently raising the exposure, adding some negative clarity, and maybe a touch of negative dehaze, or even slightly warming the temperature if I want that more golden feel. If the subject is blocking that light source, often I'll subtract them from the mask, which is really easy to do. This is just so the light still behaves quite naturally. And this is why it's so important to be mindful of where that light is coming from in your scene. After applying all that, I usually pull back the amount slider just a little bit. This is a personal one, but I often find I've gone too far at first just to make that real noticeable difference. So just by scaling it back a tiny bit, helps keep things more clean and slightly more natural. All right, that's it for this one. So I hope you picked up a few useful things. I'll catch you in the next one. Please do subscribe and check out some of my other videos too. Keep on creating, keep on growing, my friends. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.